Hello everybody and welcome back to Odin's Movie Blog. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well. And today we're first going to be talking about Star Wars Episode 9. Indeed, the title has not been revealed yet. Many people speculate that they might very well wait until Star Wars Celebration in order to reveal the title and probably reveal a teaser trailer, which I guess in some ways makes sense to me because they obviously don't want to release things too early because that just gives more time for channels like mine and others, if it is indeed going to be the type of film that we think it's going to be, to kind of point it out and be critical of it before, before the movie actually comes out in December. Or also, it could be that they just want to make sure that they get it right. I want to lean more towards that second option. I honestly think that they want to get it right. I think that the words of Bob Iger, the words of several other people involved, seem to indicate that they know they have a problem. They know that they're losing money when it comes to the Star Wars property. They know that the Star Wars IP that they bought for $4 billion is no longer at this point worth that $4 billion price tag. Is it still well enough where they could probably make some money and they're going to make money in Episode 9 no matter what? Yeah, I would say that at this point, Episode 9 is guaranteed to at least break even at the box office. However, we can't really say or know for sure until we, one, get a title, and two, more importantly, get some footage, get an actual trailer going. What is interesting, though, about the entire story, what is interesting about the entire debacle with this whole title situation is the fact that even the Star Wars story group, that infamous story group of a bunch of people who had almost no prior experience in writing, yet somehow were given the reins and given control of determining not only what novels and what things were considered to be a part of the new Disney canon, but also the ones who are in charge of trying to make sure that the stories that are being told in the future under the Disney brand are indeed consistent. They must have taken a day off. They must have taken an entire year off when Rian Johnson came forward with his amazing idea with The Last Jedi, because obviously all of us know at this point the countless numbers of issues with that story, the countless number of flaws and also canonical issues that exist within that one story alone. But at the same time, it is also kind of interesting the fact that they would keep this kind of a thing from them. Now, it makes some sense because this is obviously a huge deal. They want to make this movie feel big. I think that's the reason why they're doing it. They want to make this movie. They want to make sure Episode 9 feels like the biggest Star Wars movie that they have ever done in history. It explains a lot because guess what? Would they rather their film be like The Force Awakens where there's so much hype and so much anticipation, or would they rather it be like The Last Jedi or like Solo Star Wars Story? Solo Star Wars Story, I think, being the far extreme of that end, being a film that lost money even though it was a Star Wars film, and The Last Jedi, which yes, made $1.3 billion. Again, of course, you have to subtract money that they actually spent on the movie and take into account they only made 60% of that money in the first place. It still made money. It was still profitable. However, I think that they would much rather be closer to that $2 billion that The Force Awakens had. I don't think they're ever going to get to that point again. I think that they have just done so much damage to the fan base that they're never going to be able to get the fans to come out in that way unless they wait a little bit of while, a little while, or if someone takes over. If someone like again, I don't think it's, and I'm not suspecting that George Lucas is going to come back. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't predict that. But if they were to put somebody who the fans recognize, if they were to put somebody that the fans know and can trust in charge, if they were to say, yeah, Kathleen Kennedy is done, and, they can say everything that they want, saying, oh, she's decided to retire, she got their honorary Oscar, and now she's just going to retire and just be a producer, she's no longer going to be the head of Lucasfilm. I think at the end of the day, we wouldn't buy the story, but we would be much happier because guess what? If Kathleen Kennedy was gone, that is a good thing. If we know anything about Kathleen Kennedy at this point, is that she has no idea how to long-term book movies and projects. And yes, I love always using my wrestling terminology because seriously, if you're talking about individual films, finances, sure. Can she get the money to show up for the film to produce it? Yes, absolutely. She can definitely be seen as a money person in that way and being able to handle the money in that way. However, what we don't really have the same kind of confidence in is her ability to make sure that a story is being told and that story is being consistent. We see that very clearly by the fact that she, from the beginning, had this trilogy in mind with 3 different directors, yet they're all supposed to be telling the same story, or at least having the same thread throughout them, and then chooses a director / writer who decides just to go off on his own tangent in Rian Johnson: The Last Jedi. So with all of those things being said, with all of those things being known, to me, it makes total sense that Mr. Pablo Hidalgo, because this is the reason why we know this story, is because Pablo Hidalgo himself, who is just the epitome of shill and of an amazing person. And seriously, like, why in the hell did this man get hired? But anyway, he says, if it has a title, I don't know it, seeming to pretty much admit that he and other members of the story group do not know the name of the title. And as I said, this is the biggest Star Wars film, or what they want us to think is the biggest Star Wars film since The Force Awakens at this point. They want to have that same kind of hype, and the best way to do that, one of the best ways to do that, especially with maybe casual Star Wars fans, is to say, what's the title going to be? Oh man, is it this, is it that? Oh, well, we're not going to know. You know, you never know. Or even our story group doesn't know. The title is so secret. But that also means two things. One, this better be one of the greatest titles and one of the greatest title reveals in history, because if they are going to overhype just the title release and it's not as good as they think it is, or it's not as good as we expect it to be, that already is going to start you off on the wrong foot. The second thing they need to do is they need to have one of the greatest trailers ever. Is it absolutely possible that they come out with a great name, with a great trailer, and all the buzz coming out from it is, oh, they're getting things back on track, they're giving the fans what they want, they're finally going to be doing things that the fans have been asking for a long time, especially when it comes to Rey possibly finally getting some kind of training, or at least it being explained as to how the hell she's that good in the Force by doing nothing other than being a woman? Maybe. You know, maybe those things will happen. Maybe those things will indeed be coming to fruition. However, it is contingent on, and it is therefore it's the responsibility of Disney and Lucasfilm at this point to make sure that both of those things happen, that you have a kick-ass title, and I would say also a very good title reveal. Star Wars Celebration very well might be the place to do that, but guarantee you this, since I'm going to be there and a bunch of other, a bunch of the other Phantom Menace people are going to be there, if it's a bad title, if it's Balance of the Force, like they was being, rumored as being the title, then you're probably going to get some mehs or some boos from the crowd. So that's the other reason too why I think that you could find yourself in a situation, because you're going to have a very hot crowd there. You're going to have a lot of people that are all on board, the shills, the John Campions, the Colliders, all those people, the press, everything. They're going to be so excited, but you're also going to have a lot of Phantom Menace people. You're going to have big channels like the Geeks and Gamers channel, like the Ethan Van Skyver's World Class BSers, and also a lot of their fans who love Star Wars, who love the EU, who love what it was before Disney just took the reins and just started doing all of this random stuff with it. So they really do need to understand that if they want that optic, there's going to be cameras everywhere. There's going to be, new media everywhere with YouTube channels with very large followings, more so than any other time, I think, any other time in a Star Wars history's, Star Wars title reveals history. And so it's going to be a very big deal for them to get it right. And so Pablo Hidalgo not knowing is probably the best thing, because not only is Pablo Hidalgo just, a troglodyte, but also, too, he's probably someone who would tell more and more people. So my guess is that the title has only been revealed to a certain group of people. I would imagine Kathleen Kennedy knows what it is. I would imagine that J.J. Abrams, of course, knows what it is. And I think they're going to keep it close to the chest and hope that it is able to stay a secret. Now, here's the question. Possibly, has it been leaked? There have been a lot of names that have been put out there. Son of Darkness is a very popular one. And if it ends up being one like that, I think Son of Darkness is one of the stronger titles for sure. But if that is indeed confirmed by an eventual reveal, is that reveal going to be rather tepid, because it has already been known, because it has already been rumored and we already know about it? So part of me wants to think, maybe, is it the case that they were maybe planning on revealing the title, but then it got leaked and they were like, maybe we should rethink this and maybe we should come up with something else? I don't know. It's worth talking about nonetheless. Also worth talking about, so switching away from Star Wars news for a second, Brie Larson. I mean, we just cannot stop. I cannot stop talking about Brie Larson, because Brie Larson, to me, single-handedly could sink the MCU. Some of you are saying, oh, you can't say that. Now, I understand where you're coming from, because a lot of you talk about the Russo brothers, who we're going to talk about in a second. But Brie Larson herself, I think, is doing a lot of damage to the MCU, regardless of what you think about how Endgame is going to do, regardless of how you think the Phase 4 project is going to do and all the future films coming out. I honestly think and could see it going either way. I could see that if the people currently running it, which again, Kevin Feige has done a great job at this, if they are able to stay on task and stay forward and stay focused on telling good, compelling stories with good characters and just leave all the identity politics nonsense out of it, they'll be fine. The reason why people like me, The reason why people are so, like a lot of us are just very concerned is because Brie Larson is a very woke individual, and it matches the wokeness that her character has had for a very long time, especially with the reboot that happened in 2012. That I think is the main reason why I myself am very worried for this film. People are saying, "Why do you keep talking about it? Why do you keep talking about it?" Because it's a Marvel film. I've been on board with Marvel since the first Iron Man movie. I remember going to see it opening weekend and being so freaking pumped and finding out, wait, there's going to be more? There's an entire universe? Keep in mind, I was not a comic reader, so I didn't know a lot about a lot of these characters, or at least not enough to really be able to have a conversation about it. So I love the MCU. I am one of the biggest fans of the MCU, and I'm one of the biggest fans of the universe that's been built and what Kevin Feige has been able to do. And if I have confidence in anyone being able to continue this push, especially as more and more people get actual fatigue, because again, 20 films, 22 films in about 10, 11 years is a lot. And eventually over time, general audiences are going to stop going because of just the nature of things. So if I could trust anyone, it would be Kevin Feige. My concern is that one of the things he's going to try and do to keep things modern, or to keep things relevant, to try and limit the amount of damage that the box office might have, is by trying to push for a more woke type agenda, a more identity politics driven agenda. And if there's any person that's going to be at the charge of all of that, it would be a Brie Larson. Brie Larson has made it no secret how she feels. And going after white men, going after this supposed fake sexism that exists apparently in the United States of America, when in reality, when you actually look at the stats and you look at the data and you look at everything else, it just isn't true. And so you look at all this and you look at the fact that they've said Captain Marvel is the future of the MCU, is the future of Phase 4. If we take them at their word, and if this is the woman that's going to be leading the charge as the character, as the spokesperson, well then yeah, I think that people do have a right to be concerned. So let's talk about some of the things that she said recently that I think really do indeed cause some concern here, especially within the question. So this is from maryclaire.co.uk, and the question alone to me is already very, very prevalent as to why we are concerned about Captain Marvel. So the question, even before the answer is given, this is the question that she's given. Let's talk about Captain Marvel. What do you think it means for young girls and people who identify as female to see this woman not need to be saved, but to do the saving and to be a strong person in the face of so much adversity. See, here's the problem. We've had strong female characters that have not needed men to get by. This is not a new concept. And that's the other reason why it's so frustrating, is because she keeps feeding into this nonsense. She keeps feeding into this, like, and people are going to say, oh, she's not the one that asked the question. No, but she answered it, and she didn't try to correct anything, and she's been very clear about how she feels about the current state of femininity in Hollywood and in the United States. And a lot of that is just based off of false information. But on top of that, now you have questions being asked of a star of a franchise who is not only saying women, but also people who identify as women. Now the trans rights issue is being brought into it, and I'm sorry, general audiences do not care about that when it comes to a general release. And the reason why we're concerned is because if Brie Larson becomes this huge icon in the feminist community, which pretty much at this point it seems like she is. We already know that Captain Marvel as a character is, just based on how woke the comic is, because guess what? It's not selling, and yet they're still making it, because the only people that seem to be buying it are the woke SJWs, who again make up a very small portion of the comic books industry. So we look to this and we try and say, okay, so what does this mean for the film? What does this mean for the future of the MCU? What does it mean for the future of Captain Marvel? And her response, I think, is very telling as well. It's so interesting, and it's not something I thought about until I was at the cinema watching Wonder Woman. About 2 minutes in, I was sobbing. 2 minutes in, and you were sobbing, and thought, why am I crying so much over this? But it was seeing all of these warrior women who were so self-sufficient. That wasn't something I identified with growing up. My hero was Indiana Jones. To have the chance to be one example of this is powerful and exciting. So we already see her making a very clear dichotomy, a very clear distinction, that now you have to have female-led movies that are talked about constantly as a female-led film, that the main focus of is that it's a female-led film and female empowerment, etc., and bucking the trends. But this is not new, and that's why it's so aggravating, is because they're acting like, people like Brie Larson are acting like there is just this, nonsensical hyper masculine, hyper racist movement that has been around and held women back and held minorities back in the film industry, that even now in 2019 are still holding them back. And the problem with all of that is that it's just not the case, especially if you just focus on that women aspect. Again, I mentioned this in the last video, where if you look at the stats, you could say easily that you are more privileged if you are born as a white woman in the United States than anyone else. I would say you could even say the same thing if you are a woman of color as well, because you are given a lot of opportunities. Now, again, I'm not trying to oversimplify the socioeconomic issues that exist from our history, and I think that we can have a discussion about that. But for her to try and act like this is some new concept, that we've never had strong females before, that we've never had female icons, that men and women have never had a woman that they can look to find inspiration from, I'm sorry, but that's just not true. And I know that people get tired of me saying the same example and saying, like, well, why don't you come up with other things? It's because the first and most exciting example that I can think of off the top of my head, the one that I know that I love, is freaking Ripley from the Alien franchise. Ripley was a badass, and men and women were able to connect to her story. Even though she very much was a mother-like figure through those films, even men could attach to it. Even men could say, hey, I understand what it's like to care for somebody so much, to have to be in that role of wanting to defend a person, to want to stand up for somebody. This is not a new concept. But again, it's the identity politics. It's the politicking that happens. And a lot of it has started because of Brie Larson and the things that she wants to do, the thing that she thinks is a problem. Again, she herself has gone out of her way to try and get this agenda started. We have this question here. You had messages of support from Emma Stone and Jennifer Lawrence, which must have helped. And it said, I found a supportive sisterhood, not just in Emma and Jen, but in the many women I've had the opportunity to come across and learn from over the past years. It's a community of like-minded people, which has been a gift, a sisterhood. There's nothing wrong with identifying with other women. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But based on all the other comments that she's had, I think it makes total sense for anyone to be worried. But I don't think we have to be worried about Endgame. And the reason why is because the Russo brothers, who are directing that, who have directed some of the greatest MCU films so far. Winter Soldier still is hands down one of my favorite MCU films. And they are the ones that are creating Endgame. They're the ones that made Infinity War one of the greatest films of 2018. The most iconic film, as many people have already voted in my own, the first ever Wednesday Raven Awards, which I'm hosting on this channel on the night of the Oscars. Many people have already made it very clear that one of the most iconic films of the year, with no question, was Infinity War. So they know what they're doing. And here is, I think, an important point. They know what they have to do. They know how to write a good story. The Captain Marvel problem facing the Avengers, Endgame, and how the Russos addressed it. Because one of the problems that was brought up was with how do you have a character who has been pushed as this OP, overpowered, crazy powered character, the most powerful character in the MCU, which we keep being told by the show media, how are they going to handle that? And their response to me is perfect. Is so good. Here's their response. It's always a concern of ours about empowering characters because the reason that people relate to these characters is their humanity and that they're flawed. And the reason we love working so much with Captain America was that he was limited and his heart was his superpower, So we're all acutely aware of the dangers of having an overly powerful character, but we like sensitive storytelling, so we found a thoughtful way through it. So these are people who know what they're doing. So Endgame, I don't think, is going to fall into the traps that many people might suspect it will. Captain Marvel is its own thing. Again, that is beyond the Russo brothers. Yes, Kevin Feige is the producer, but keep this in mind. I think that Captain Marvel is going to try and market itself to a certain audience, a certain demographic. And a lot of that is going to be politically based. And I think that if they realize that it's not as successful as they want it to be, or if it does happen to bring in the casual moviegoer and is able to be $200 million profit film, that, we can start to play with this character. We can leave everything else alone, but we can start to play around with this character. Keep this in mind. Endgame has not featured Captain Marvel yet. In the official synopsis for Endgame, this is also fascinating. This is the first official synopsis that we have. It says, after the devastating events of Avengers Infinity War, the universe is in ruins due to the efforts of the mad Titan Thanos. With the help of remaining allies, the Avengers must assemble once more in order to undo Thanos' actions and restore order to the universe once and for all, no matter what consequences may be in store. At no point do they talk about Captain Marvel. At no point do they try and make, Endgame is going to be a continuation of her story. She is instead just going to be a character, and the Russo brothers have made it clear that they do not want to have an OP character because they know how dangerous that can be for a story. They say it very clearly here. That's what kind of fires us up, I think, on a storytelling level, to be honest with you, because when you do have powerful characters, you have to work that much harder to find their vulnerabilities and complexities. And Joe was mentioning on a storytelling level, keep the stakes high, because that's where those characters are vulnerable, and actually that makes for great drama, and you run in that direction. As storytellers, has been one of the most fun things we've had working on these characters and figuring out ways into them where they are vulnerable and they aren't as powerful. And they make it clear in this interview as well that the reason why they don't want to fall into it is because they know that if you just have it being Thanos versus Brie Larson, Thanos versus Captain Marvel, and Captain Marvel defeats Thanos, they've gone on record and said that's just boring. So they understand. Again, they don't say it here, but go ahead and look into this interview even further, and they say that that is so boring, and they know that audiences are not going to like that. And so they understand. So I'm not worried about them. I'm not worried about Endgame. I think that the Russo brothers understand that Captain Marvel must only be a piece of their puzzle and not the whole damn thing. Now, everyone that's going crazy about Brie Larson and Captain Marvel and all this other stuff, they're going to want that. They're going to say, oh man, the best part was Captain Marvel. They're going to talk up the actual movie Captain Marvel itself. They're going to say, oh my God, it's the greatest thing ever. And oh my God. They're going to try and make it the most important film of all time, when in reality, it's just another movie. And that's what I love about the Russo brothers, is because they're pretty much saying this is any other movie that we've ever worked on, where we want to make sure all the characters are relatable and all of our stories are interesting and compelling. But anyway, guys, what are y'all's thoughts about this? I'm sorry I went a little bit long, but first off, the Star Wars title. Again, I think it's one of two things. I think that either that the title has been leaked and they're kind of holding it close to the chest because maybe they're trying to change their mind a bit, or it is that they want to try and build as much anticipation as they can for Star Wars Celebration. And what are your thoughts on the Brie Larson thing? I know that I've been talking about Captain Marvel a lot lately, but guess what? What's one of the biggest movies coming out this year? Whether I like it or not, it's Captain Marvel. Again, there's 3 big movies coming out this year that you think of as far as like huge box office comic book films, and that would be Captain Marvel, that would be Endgame, and then of course that would be Star Wars. So those are the movies that I'm going to be talking about a lot. I can't wait to talk about things like John Wick 3. I can't wait to talk about other films when they come out or when it gets closer to them being released. But let's just be honest here. This is where the conversation is currently taking us. But I have so much more confidence in Endgame now, and I'm less worried about about Endgame being turned into a woke celebration, because the Russo brothers seem to have a very firm grasp. In fact, note how in both points of those quotes that are listed here, at no point do they even mention Brie Larson or even mention Captain Marvel. And I think that that is something that they themselves know. They cannot make this a strong female woman destroys everything and wins the day. They need to instead turn it into this is characters with good development working together, bringing about the end of one of the greatest villains of all time. And I cannot wait to see that. Anyway, guys, love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you like this video, smash that like button, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Have a wonderful day. And as always, God bless.